Yeah, hi. I don't know where you came from. If you came here from the playlist, welcome. If you are seeing this video first, you might want to locate that playlist and start from the beginning, because we are reading this book. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's I think it came out a while ago. I don't know. But yeah, we're already this far in, so you're gonna want to read all of this bit with all the other wonderful people that are reading it out loud for you. Yeah? So locate that playlist. If you don't know how to find it, ask someone who does. I don't know. Let's get started. No one mentioned how difficult it was going to be to read with sunglasses on. I'm not really much of a reader, but I'm also not gonna take these off because I look good. Madame Tracy heard Mr. Shadwell's slow tread come up the stairs. It was slower than usual, and paused every few steps. Normally he came up the stairs as if he hated every single one of them. She opened her door. He was leaning against the landing wall. "Why, Mr. Shadwell," she said, "whatever have you done to your hand?" "Get away from me, woman!" Shadwell groaned. "I didn't know my own powers." "Why are you holding it out like that?" Shadwell tried to back into the wall. "Stand back, I tell you! I cannot be responsible." "What on earth has happened to you, Mr. Shadwell?" said Madame Tracy, trying to take his hand. "Nothing on earth! Nothing on earth!" She managed to grab his arm. He, Shadwell, scourge of evil, was powerless to resist being drawn into her flat. He'd never been in it before, at least in his waking moments. His dreams had furnished it in silks, rich hangings, and what he thought of as scented ungulates. Admittedly, it did have a bead curtain in the entrance to the kitchenette, and a lamp made rather inexpertly from a Chianti bottle, because Madame Tracy's apprehension of what was chic, like Aziraphale's, had grounded somewhere around 1953. And there was a table in the middle of the room with a velvet cloth on it, and on the cloth, the crystal ball which increasingly was Madame Tracy's means of earning a living. "I think you could do with a good lie down, Mr. Shadwell," she said, in a voice that broke no argument, and led him into the bedroom. He was too bewildered to protest. "But young Newt is out there," Shadwell muttered, "enthralled to heathen passions and occult wiles." "Then I'm sure he'll know exactly what to do about them," said Madame Tracy briskly, whose mental picture of what Newt was going through was probably much closer to reality than was Shadwell's. "And I'm sure he wouldn't like to think of you getting yourself worked up into a state here. Just you lie down, and I'll make us both a nice cup of tea." She disappeared in a clanking of bead curtains. Suddenly Shadwell was alone in what he was just capable of recalling, through the wreckage of his shattered nerves, was a bed of sin, and right at this moment was incapable of deciding whether that was in fact better or worse than not being alone in a bed of sin. He turned his head to take in his surroundings. Madame Tracy's concepts of what were erotic stemmed from the days when young men grew up thinking that women had beach balls affixed firmly to the front of their anatomy, Bridget Bardot could be called a sex kitten without anyone bursting out laughing, and there really were magazines with names like Girls, Garters, and Giggles. Somewhere in this cauldron of permissiveness, she had picked up on the idea that soft toys in the bedroom created an intimate, coquettish air. Shadwell stared for some time at a large, threadbare teddy bear, which had one eye missing and a torn ear. It probably had a name like Mr. Buggins. He turned his head the other way. His gaze was blocked by a pajama case shaped like an animal that may have been a dog, but there again, might have been a skunk. It had a cheery grin. "Ugh," he said, but recollection kept storming back. He really had done it. No one else in the army had ever exorcised a demon as far as he knew. Not Hopkins, not Siftings, not Diceman, probably not even Witchfinder Company Sergeant Narker. The WA enjoyed a renaissance during the great days of Empire expansionism. The British Army's endless skirmishes frequently brought it up against witch doctors, bone pointers, shaman, and other occult adversaries. This was the cue for the deployment of the likes of WA CSM Narker, whose striding, bellowing, 6'6", 18-stone figure, clutching an armor-plated book, 8-pound bell, and specially reinforced candle, could clear the belt of adversaries faster than a Gulting gun. Cecil Rhodes wrote of him, "Some remote tribes consider him to be a kind of god, and it is an extremely brave or foolhardy witch doctor who will stand his ground with CSM Narker bearing down on him. I would rather have this man on my side than 2 battalions of Gurkhas." who had held the all-time record for most witches found. Sooner or later, every army runs across its ultimate weapon, and now it existed, Shadwell reflected, on the end of his arm. Well, sod no first use. He'd have a bit of rest, seeing as he was here, and then the powers of darkness had met their match at last. When Madame Tracy brought the tea in, he was snoring. She tactfully closed the door, and rather thankfully as well, because she had a séance due in 20 minutes, and it was no good turning down money these days. Although Madame Tracy was, by many yardsticks, quite stupid, she had an instinct in certain matters, and when it came to dabbling in the occult, her reasoning was faultless. Dabbling, she'd realized, was exactly what her customers wanted. They didn't want to be shoved up in it to their necks. They didn't want the multiplanular mysteries of time and space. They just wanted to be reassured that Mother was getting along fine now that she was dead. They wanted just enough occult to season the simple fare of their lives, and preferably in portions no longer than 45 minutes, followed by tea and biscuits. They certainly didn't want odd candles, scents, chants, or mystic runes. Madame Tracy had even removed most of the major arcana from her tarot card pack, because their appearance tended to upset people. And she made sure that she had always put sprouts on to boil just before a séance. Nothing is more reassuring, nothing more true to the comfortable spirit of English occultism, than the smell of Brussels sprouts cooking in the next room. It was early afternoon, and the heavy storm clouds had turned the sky the color of old lead. It would rain soon, heavily, blindingly. The firemen hoped the rain would come soon, the sooner the better. They had arrived fairly promptly, and the younger firemen were dashing around excitedly, unrolling their hose pipe and flexing their axes. The older firemen knew at a glance that the building was a dead loss, and weren't even sure that the rain would stop it spreading to neighboring buildings, when a black Bentley skidded around the corner and drove up on the pavement at a speed somewhere in excess of 60 miles per hour, and stopped with a screech of brakes half an inch away from the wall of the bookshop. An extremely agitated young man in dark glasses got out and ran towards the door of the blazing bookshop. He was intercepted by a fireman. "Are you the owner of this establishment?" asked the fireman. "Don't be stupid! Do I look like I run a bookshop?" "I really wouldn't know about that, sir. Appearances can be very deceptive. For example, I am a fireman. However, upon meeting me socially, people unaware of my occupation often suppose that I am, in fact, a chartered accountant or company director. Imagine me out of uniform, sir, and what kind of man would you see before you, honestly?" "A prat," said Crowley, and he ran into the bookshop. This sounds easier than it actually was, since in order to manage it, Crowley needed to avoid half a dozen firemen, 2 policemen, and a number of interesting Soho night people. In any other place than Soho, it is quite possible that spectators at a fire might have been interested. It happened again! Out early and arguing heatedly amongst themselves about which particular section of society had brightened up the afternoon and why. Crowley pushed straight through them. They scarcely spared him a glance. Then he pushed open the door and stepped into an inferno. The whole bookshop was ablaze. "Aziraphale!" he called. "Aziraphale, you stupid Aziraphale! Are you here?" No answer. Just the crackle of burning paper, the splintering of glass as the fire reached the upstairs room, the crash of collapsing timbers. He scanned the shop urgently, desperately, looking for the angel, looking for help. In the far corner, a bookshelf toppled over, cascading flaming books across the floor. The fire was all around him, and Crowley ignored it. His left trouser leg began to smolder. He stopped it with a glance. "Hello! Aziraphale! For somebody's sake, Aziraphale!" The shop window was smashed from the outside. Crowley turned, startled, and an unexpected jet of water struck him full in the chest, knocking him to the ground. His shades flew to a far corner of the room and became a puddle of burning plastic. They revealed yellow eyes with slitted vertical pupils, wet and steaming, face ash-blackened, as far from cool as it was possible for him to be. On all fours in the blazing bookshop, Crowley cursed Aziraphale and the ineffable plan, and above and below. Then he looked down and saw it. The book. The book that girl had left in the car in Tadfield on Wednesday night. It was slightly scorched around the cover, but miraculously unharmed. He picked it up, stuffed it into his jacket pocket, stood up unsteadily and brushed himself off. The floor above him collapsed. With a roar and gargantuan shrug, the building fell in on itself, in a rain of brick and timber and flaming debris. Outside, the passers-by were being herded back by the police, and a fireman was explaining to anyone who would listen. "I couldn't stop him. He must have been mad or drunk, just ran in. I couldn't stop him. Mad, ran straight in. Horrible way to die. Horrible, horrible. Just ran straight in." Then Crowley came out of the flames. The police and the firemen looked at him, saw the expression on his face, and stayed exactly where they were. He climbed into the Bentley and reversed back into the road, swung around a fire truck, into Wardour Street, and into the darkened afternoon. They stared at the car as it sped away. Finally, one policeman spoke. "Weather like this, he ought to have put his lights on," he said numbly. "Especially driving like that. Could be dangerous," another agreed in flat, dead notes. And they all stood there in the light and the heat of the burning bookshop, wondering what was happening to a world they had thought they understood. There was a flash of lightning, blue-white, strobing across the cloud-black sky, a rumble of thunder so loud it hurt, and a hard rain began to fall. And that's where we're stopping. Yeah. I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm sure you did. It's a great book, and, well, yeah, it had me in it. So what's not to like? Again, this is just a bit of the book. There are more bits of the book in that playlist thing. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of the book with all the other wonderful people who are reading it. I'll link the playlist here if that's a thing that I can do. Not very technology-wise, me, yeah. Bye!